Number 2, I see that I have a polynomial set to 0, but it's not factored. So I need to factor it so that I can solve it. So I'm looking at the middle term, and I see that my sum should be a positive 3. And then for my product, remember, we're going to look at the lead coefficient, which is an implied 1, and the negative 10 for the constant. So my product is also a product. It's 1 times negative 10, which is just a negative 10. So I'm looking for things that multiply to give me a negative 10 and add up to a positive 3. So thinking just what multiplies to give me 10, and then I can worry about the negative in a minute. I know 1 times 10, and then 2 is times 5. 3 won't work. 4 won't work. And so here's my complete list because 5's on there already. So now I'm looking which ones are 3 apart. So these are 9 apart and these are 3 apart. But now I have to work out the sign. So I need a negative 10 for my product. So one of these two has to be negative. And if I put the negative here, then I'll get a positive 3. And let's just look at the other possibility. If I put the negative on the 5, then my sum will be negative 3. So the pair that I want is the one that gives me the positive 3 because that was what I was after. So when I rewrite this, it's x squared minus 2x plus 5x minus 10 equals 0. Now remember that these two middle terms I put in instead of the 3x. And that means that if I add those two together, I better get 3x, or it's not equivalent to what I started with. So let's think, negative 2x plus 5x. So 5 minus 2 is 3, so it would be 3x, and that's what I had. So that is correct. And now I want to use factor by grouping because I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So I'm grouping the first 2 terms together and then the last 2 terms together. First pair of terms, what can I factor out? I see I have an x on each term, so I'll factor that. There's no number part on the x squared, it's an implied 1, so there's not a number to factor out. So I have x times a quantity. X times x will give me x squared, so I put an x here. And then what do I multiply x by to get negative 2x? And the answer is going to be negative 2. So if I multiply here, I get the x squared. If I multiply here, I get the negative 2x. That's perfect. Now looking at the last 2 terms, what can I factor out? I see that they're both divisible by 5. And since this first term is positive, I'll say plus 5. And then positive 5 times what is going to give me a 5x? And I have to multiply by an x, so I'll write that in. And then 5 times what will give me negative 10, and we know that's negative 2. And then I still write the equals 0. Now I'm looking for a matching factor on both of these terms. There's one matching factor and there's the other. And so I can just pull that out to the front, x minus 2. And then what I have left is x minus 2 times what will give me this first term here. The answer is x. X minus 2 times what will give me this whole second term here, and the answer is a positive 5. So that one's factored now, and I can look at the 0 factor property. So set that first term, the first factor equal to 0, x minus 2 equals 0, or x plus 5 equals 0. Remember, the only way to get a product of 0, 2 things to multiply and end up with 0, is if one of them or the other or both are 0. So we just go ahead and set each factor to 0 and solve our little equations and find out what will happen, what will make that happen for us. So we'll add 2 to both sides here. I want to get that x by itself, so I have x equals a positive 2. Subtract 5 from both sides here, and I have x equals a negative 5. So I have 2 solutions, x equals 2 or x equals negative 5. Now I do want to check those just to be sure. And because when I check, I start to understand more about the problem. So let's try it out. So x equals 2. So I plug into where I see the x, 2 squared, plus 3 times 2, that's where the x was, minus 10, and it should come out to 0. So 2 squared means 2 times 2, so that's a 4. And then 3 times 2 is a 6, and then minus 10 equals 0. 4 plus 6 is 10, minus 10, that will definitely give me 0. And then I want to check the x equals a negative 5. And I'm using the original equation, remember, so that I can make sure that I have solved the entire problem correctly, not just the second half of the problem. So plug in negative 5 wherever I see x, so that means I have negative 5 quantity squared because I had an x squared there, and then plus 3 times negative 5, that's for the 3x, minus 10 should give me 0. So negative 5 quantity squared means negative 5 times negative 5, and negative times negative, that'll give me a positive 25. So for a negative 5 quantity squared, I get a 25, and then positive 3 times negative 5 will give me negative 15, and then minus 10 that was already there. I want to know, does that equal 0? And 25 minus 15 is 10, minus 10, definitely 0. So the second answer checks out as well.